Do rhinoceros dream of electric humans?
Animals. We live with them, love them, talk to them. We fear and loathe them. We feed them, raise them, groom them, hunt them, slaughter and eat them. We ogle, exploit, and worship them. From Noah's Ark to Aesop's fables to Moby Dick to Duck Dynasty, they populate our mythologies and affect our daily lives, in the wild, on city streets, in living rooms, and in cages.
As the public relations manager for the Philadelphia Zoo, my window overlooked the polar bear pool and the African plains. I'd swivel my chair to rest my heels on the wooden frame behind my desk and watch the animals. The children would press their small hands and noses against the polar bear exhibit. They'd scream and jump back as Goldilocks or Klondike dove into the blue water and smacked a great white paw against the thick, scratched glass. The parents would explain to their children that the big bears were just playing. I laugh on the phone to one of my friends. The polar bears are trying to kill the kids again. In the wild, they would have.
Rhinoceros. Rhinoceros comes from two Greek words, rhino, meaning nose, and ceros, meaning head.
Some days, I'd visit the animal nursery. Newborns were always good for positive news coverage. Maybe a new baby lemur would be playing and would run up one of my arms and down the other, as if I were a firmly planted tree. Or I'd stop by to visit the elephants. One of the keepers, who later became a friend, would sometimes take me inside the enclosure so Petal could greet me by running her bristled gray trunk up and down my coat, leaving a long, slimy trail. After these visits, I might smell like a monkey, or the powerful, earthy odor of the elephant house would cling to me. I'd call this my zoo perfume. But I'd always end my errands at the home of Masa. Masa was the world's oldest captive gorilla.
Tundra, city.
It was a day of startling blue and yellow. She was smoking a cigarette and drinking vodka from the bottle. It was breakfast. She was thinking that there were elements of luck in all things: geography, anatomy, the ritual astonishments of seasons.
Our ruins are radioactive. They have half-lives larger than empires or emptiness itself. And somewhere, a bit player is saying, look at history. It's always been brutal.
Rhinoceros. They are relatively uncommon in the wild, which adds to their mysterious persona.
Rhinos are solitary creatures, which in the wild is almost certain to be a dangerous way to live.
The gathering risks of climate change are so profound they could stall or even reverse generations of progress against poverty and hunger if greenhouse emissions continue at a runaway pace, according to a new major United Nations report. Failure to reduce emissions, the group of scientists and other experts found, could threaten society with food shortages, refugee crises, and flooding of major cities and entire island nations. Mass extinction of plants and animals.
Sense, sight, smell.
Rhinoceroses have poor eyesight, but acute senses of hearing and smelling.
Nothing is more memorable than a smell. Smells detonate softly in our memory like poignant landmines, hidden under a weedy mass of years and experiences. Hit a tripwire of smell, and memories explode all at once. A complex vision springs out from the undergrowth, inhaling and exhaling. We smell odors.
Smells coat us and swirl us around us, enter our bodies. Innate from us, we live in a constant wash of them. Wash of them.
Skin, hide.
A group of rhinos is called a crash. Walking down Castro Street on a Sunday afternoon just beyond where the Visadero veers to the right, I saw a naked old man walking towards me.
In those days, the rhinoceros skin fitted him quite tight. There were no wrinkles in it anywhere. He looked exactly like a Noah's Ark rhinoceros, but of course, much bigger.
You'll recall that when King Lear takes off his clothes, he offends majesty. The scandal of Lear's abrogation is that without raiment, a king is a frail, poor creature, indistinguishable from a groundling. His kingdom is disarmed.
5 weeks later, there were a heat wave in the Red Sea, and everybody took off all the clothes they had. The rhinoceros took off his skin and carried it over his shoulders as he came down to the beach to bathe. In those days, it bottomed underneath with 3 bottoms and looked like waterproof.
Very early in my life, it was too late. It was already too late when I was 18. Between 18 and 25, my face took off in a new direction. I grew old at 18. I don't know if it's the same for everyone, I've never asked. But I believe I've heard of the way time can suddenly accelerate even the most youthful and highly esteemed stages of life. My aging was very sudden. I saw it spread over my features one by one, changing the relationship between them, making the eyes larger, the expression sadder, the mouth more final, leaving giant creases in the forehead.
Rhinoceros bottomed it up with the 3 bottoms, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. Then he wanted to scratch, but they made it worse. And then he lay down on the sand and rolled and rolled and rolled, and every time he rolled, the cake crumbs tickled him worse and worse and worse.
And I've kept it ever since. The new face I had then. It has been my face. It's gotten older still, of course, but less, comparatively, than it would have otherwise. It's scored with deep, dry wrinkles. The skin is cracked. But my face hasn't collapsed, as some with fine features have done. It's kept the same contours, but its substance has been laid waste. I have a face laid waste.
Then he ran to the palm tree and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed himself against it. He rubbed so much and so hard that he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulders and another fold underneath where the bottoms used to be. And he rubbed some more folds over his legs.
Bodies are real. Once youth passes, we carry our bodies around with us with a growing sense of estrangement from them, though we fear leaving our bodies behind.
Horn magic. The Rhinoceros Sutra in Buddhism states that in order to reach enlightenment, one should wander like the rhino so as not to give in to violent inklings and do harm to another living being. In medieval Nepal, rhino horns were used to make kukri knife handles, which were believed to ward off evil.
"Tell me a rhinoceros story," said I to proud Jan, the best storyteller of the party, and handing some time a well-filled stone pipe, and after a few satisfactory whiffs, he commenced.
Rhino horns are not made of bone, but of keratin, the same material found in your hair and fingernails.
Rhinos were initially mistaken for unicorns by the ancient Greeks. A rhino's horn was often sold as the horn of a unicorn in Europe up until the 18th century.
When Rhinoceros is quietly pursuing his way through his favorite glades of mimosa bushes, which his hooked upper lip enables him to readily to seize, and his powerful grinders to masticate, his horns fix loosely on his skin, making a clapping noise by striking one against the other. But on the approach of danger, if his quick ear or keen scent make him aware of the vicinity of a hunter, his head is quickly raised and the horn stands stiff and ready for combat on his terrible front.
Powdered rhino horn has been prescribed by Asian doctors for centuries as a cure for a wide range of diseases or conditions, including aging, arthritis, asthma, black magic, boils, and carbuncles. chest cold, chickenpox convulsions, coughs, demonic possession, diphtheria, dog bites, dysentery, epilepsy, fainting, fevers, fits, food poisoning, hallucinations, headaches, hemorrhoids, impotence, insanity, laryngitis, lumbago, malaria, measles, melancholy, memory loss, myopia, night blindness, nightmares, nosebleed, plague, polio, prescription overdoses, rectal bleeding, vomiting, scorpion stings, smallpox, snake bite, toothache, typhoid, and worms. There is no evidence from Western scientific studies that it has any curative powers, but at least one Chinese study disputes that data. And of course, its use is illegal.
The monster, snorting and uttering occasionally a short, fiendish scream of rage, bears down in a cloud of dust, tearing up the ground with his curved plowshare, kicking out his hind legs in a paroxysm of passion, and thrusting his horns between the trembling legs of his flying victim. He hurts him into the air as if he were a rag. The poor wretch falls many yards off. The brute now looks about for him, and if there is the least movement of life, he runs at him, rips him open, and tramples to a mummy.
A rhino's horn is not attached to its skull. It is actually a compacted mass of hairs that continues to grow throughout the animal's lifetime, just like our own hair and nails. Regrettably, neither human hair nor fingernails are believed to possess the healing properties that some people believe are found in the rhino horn. If people believed they did, they could chew their own nails and cut their own hair in order to feel well and halt the needless slaughter of rhinos.
This tragedy, the rhino limped off to the shelter of a bush. Henrik and the others crept up to destroy him. He dashed out again and would have caught another man had it not been for a dog which came in the way barking. In turning short after the dog, the half-broken bone of the rhinoceros snapped. It fell, unable to recover itself, and was immediately shot dead.
Afterlife. Dream, Bardo.
I have seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. Time to die.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead is ostensibly a book describing the experiences to be expected at the moment of death. During an intermediate phase lasting 49, 70 times 7 days, and during rebirth into another bodily frame. It is a book of the dying, which is to say, a book of the living. It is a book of life and how to live.
The call woke me up at 2 a.m. on December 31st, 1984. Masa had died. The animal supervisor needed the pathologist's help to carry Masa's body out of his enclosure down to the Penrose lab, an old brick building that housed the zoo hospital.
This manual is divided into 4 parts. The first part is introductory. The second is a step-by-step description of a psychedelic experience based directly on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The third part contains practical suggestions on how to prepare for and conduct a psychedelic session. The fourth part contains instructive passages adapted from the Bardo Thotol, which may be read to the voyager during this session to facilitate the movement of consciousness.
After his death, I went back to the pathology room in the Penrose lab where the necropsies were performed. By the time I got there, the big metal table with the upturned sides only held the bloody instruments from the procedure.
It may be argued that nobody can talk about death with authority who has not died. And since nobody apparently has ever returned from death, How can anybody know what death is or what happens after it?
Tibetan will answer, there is not one person, indeed, not one living being that has not returned from death. In fact, we all have died many deaths before we came into this incarnation. And what we call birth is merely the reverse side of death, like one of the two sides of a coin, or like a door which we call entrance from outside and exit from inside a room.
The pathologist deemed his cause of death to be coronary artery disease. He likely lived far longer than a typical gorilla in the wild, but I couldn't help think that over time, his heart might have hardened from his solitary existence. I imagined his veins and arteries closing up, becoming narrower and narrower, till there was only the whisper of life, and then nothing.
Paul Manette, the writer, whom I do not know well, was driving that morning. Caesar sat in the front seat. I was wedged between the two men in the back seat. One of the two had something to do with Hollywood. The car was small. The windows were steamed. The weather must have been cold or wet. We were driving down to Belmont, now a part of Greater Silicon Valley, and at that time a peninsula suburb. Within 10 years, everyone in the car would be dead, except me.
While steeped in grief, our defenses are down. It seems we are more open to that kind of thinking. The Buddhist teacher and author Tara Brach says, in some religious traditions, one who is mourning is considered most holy, is open to that which is beyond this world.
You must try to maintain faith and trust in the potentiality of your own brain and the billion-year-old life. Trust your divinity, trust your brain, trust your companions. Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, float downstream.